The Secret Alpha Queen, Part 3. Kela woke to a ripple of pain running through her shoulder, a stark reminder of the ambush that she and Alpha King Rhaegar had survived only days before. She sat up in the large bed of the Dark Moon Pack's castle, a place that still felt both foreign and comforting all at once. Early sunlight poured through the high windows, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. As she carefully rotated her aching arm, she realized that even the simplest movements felt heavier than usual. Memories of the frantic battle in the mountain pass flooded her mind. Malakai's swirling black magic, the slash of his unnatural blade across Rhaegar's arm, her own sword biting into Malakai's side, then the hiss of dark energy flinging them to the ground, nearly claiming Rhaegar's life. A soft knock at the door broke her reverie. Ella, her loyal maid and friend, peeked inside. "Kela, are you awake?" she asked gently. Her brown eyes filled with concern. "I'm up," Kela replied, beckoning her in. "Though I wish I could forget the pain for just a few more minutes." Ella bustled forward, setting down a tray of tea and bread on a small wooden table. "You need to eat, and then Thomas wants to speak with you. He's been pacing downstairs in the corridor, looking worried." Kela's heart clenched at the mention of her beta, Thomas, who had been her closest confidant for so long in the Moonlight Pack. She remembered vividly how he had stood by her during those secret years when she led her pack from the shadows while her father, Alpha, Dorian, remained broken by grief. Thomas would surely have news, and given how unsettled everything felt, she braced herself for the possibility that it might be bad. After quickly dressing, she followed Ella out of the room, moving slowly to avoid aggravating her shoulder. A guard posted at the end of the corridor nodded respectfully as she passed, but Kela couldn't help noticing a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze, as though he wasn't entirely sure whether she belonged here. She swallowed her irritation. Rhaegar had claimed her as his mate, but the union of two powerful packs was still new and contentious. Some warriors, especially among the Dark Moon ranks, struggled to accept an alpha female from another territory as their queen. She found Thomas in a wide, torchlit hall outside the war room, talking in low tones with Beta Andrew, Rhaegar's second-in-command. Both men turned the moment they spotted her. Thomas's warm, dark eyes immediately scanned her face for signs of pain. "Kela," Thomas said, bowing his head slightly. "How's the shoulder?" "I'll survive," she replied, mustering a smile. "What's happened?" Andrew gestured for them to move into the war room, where a long wooden table was spread with maps of the region. Candles flickered on iron sconces, illuminating half a dozen wary faces belonging to both Dark Moon and Moonlight warriors. Rhaegar was already there, standing at the head of the table, posture rigid with tension. The sight of him made Kela's pulse quicken. Even exhausted, he looked formidable. Tall, broad-shouldered, hair cut in a warrior style, and those storm-gray eyes that seemed to see right through her defenses. At the moment, though, concern etched lines across his brow. He strode to her in 3 quick steps. "I was just about to send for you," he said, voice low with relief. "We've had troubling reports." Her chest tightened. "Troubling in what way?" "Malachi," Andrew said, casting a glance at Thomas. "He's not gone. We have word from scouts that he's been spotted on the fringes of Dark Moon territory. They found evidence of forced recruitment. Smaller packs told they have no choice but to kneel or be destroyed." Thomas nodded grimly. "We also have rumors from Rowan." At Kela's slight frown, Thomas explained further. "He's the deserter from Malakai's ranks who came to us before the ambush. Rowan apparently caught wind of more witches arriving. Dark witches who practice a magic specifically designed to sever mate bonds." A stunned hush fell over the group. Kela felt Rhaegar's hand come to rest lightly on her uninjured shoulder, as though reminding himself that she was there. The warmth of his touch reassured her, but she also sensed the roiling fury within him. The very idea of a power that could tear them apart was repulsive. "They think they can break the mate bond?" Rhaegar asked quietly. There was a dark undertone in his voice that made a few warriors edge back in unease. "They claim they can," Andrew said. And if Malachi truly believes the prophecy involving Kela, one that says she carries a lineage tied to the moon goddess herself, then severing her mate bond to you would be his ultimate move. He wants to twist that power for himself. Kela swallowed hard. The prophecy. She had heard bits and pieces, enough to know that Malachi was obsessed with capturing her for some dark ritual. She hated thinking about it. Hated thinking that her birth or her unknown lineage might grant someone so twisted an advantage. We can't let it happen, she said, voice firm. I agree, Rhaegar replied, matching her tone. He wants a war. We'll give it to him. On our terms. A murmur rippled through the assembled wolves. They had fought Malachi once and forced him to retreat, but no one in the room doubted the danger he posed, especially if he had tapped into more powerful magic. Kela remembered the vile swirl of darkness around his hands, the raw force that had nearly crushed her and Rhaegar. Now Malachi would return more prepared, and more determined to tear them apart. Thomas cleared his throat. We'll need a united front, my lord, and we need to ensure there are no traitors in our midst. Andrew's expression turned grim. Rumors have been circulating, suggesting that someone within the castle is feeding information to Malachi. Not all the details, but enough that he knows where to strike with the greatest effect. Kela felt a flicker of dread. Betrayal from within was more dangerous than anything Malachi could do from outside. Who do we suspect? She asked. No firm leads yet, Andrew admitted. But we're investigating quietly. The last thing we need is paranoia to tear us apart. Rhaegar inclined his head. Do that, and let's keep Rowan close under guard. If he's truly turned on Malachi, he might know how these witches operate. He could be our best chance at stopping them. Kela watched the interplay of expressions in the room. She noticed the uneasy shifting of a few warriors, some from the dark moon side, others from her own moonlight pack. All the while, Rhaegar's presence at her side provided an anchor. A moment later, he squeezed her hand gently as though sensing her anxiety. We'll reconvene at dusk, he announced. By then I want more intel from the scouts. Dorian? He turned toward Kela's father, who stood near the far end of the table. I'd value your input on strengthening the wards around our borders. Your pack's defensive tactics are renowned. Alpha Dorian, still looking somewhat weary from years of mourning and the stress of battle, managed a proud incline of his head. I'll do whatever it takes to protect our people, he said, and his gaze flicked to Kela. In his eyes, she read both fatherly concern and a quiet acceptance that his daughter truly was a leader in her own right. The meeting dispersed, warriors heading out to carry out the new orders. Kela lingered behind, feeling Rhaegar's tension in the line of his shoulders. Once the others had left, she turned to him and pressed her palm against his chest. We'll get through this, she whispered. Together. His hand covered hers, calloused and warm. I'll tear down the kingdom if it means keeping you safe, he murmured fiercely, eyes dark with emotion. I almost lost you once to Magnus, and that was nearly the end of me. If Malachi thinks he can break our bond, he'll learn just how relentless I can be. Kela's throat tightened. She wished she could say something light-hearted to lift his spirits, but she couldn't summon a joke or a tease now. Instead, she simply let the steady beat of his heart under her palm speak for her. Together, they made their way out of the war room and down the winding corridors of the castle, thoughts heavy with the threats they faced. By the afternoon, the tension around the castle became palpable. Work crews toiled away, reinforcing walls and setting up new defensive measures. The courtyard bustled with more warriors than usual, moonlight and dark moon soldiers side by side, but still retaining a cautious distance. Kela watched them from a stone balcony, noting every shift in posture, every uncertain glance. She thought of how quickly an alliance could crumble if suspicion took root. Behind her, she heard footsteps echo on the stone. She turned to see her maid, Ella, approaching with a bow. Kela, Ella said softly, I wanted to check on you. You barely ate at lunch. Kela forced a small smile. I'll be all right, there's just... So much to worry about. Ella glanced toward the courtyard below. I know. People are on edge. There's talk that Malachi could appear at any moment. Kayla's shoulder twinged painfully, reminding her of her own brush with that powerful, malevolent alpha. She exhaled slowly. Fear makes sense, but we need to keep them unified. We can't risk Malachi using our own doubts against us. You've been through so much in such a short time. Ella hesitated, then added, I see how Rhaegar looks at you now, and I see how you look at him. Heat flared in Kayla's cheeks. She couldn't lie. Despite her dread over Malachi, the bond she shared with Rhaegar had grown stronger with each passing day. She felt it in every whispered conversation, every stolen kiss in the corridors, every moment he brushed his hand against hers as though afraid she might disappear. Ella gave a knowing nod. Don't be ashamed of it. You two have found something rare and powerful. I only hope it helps you both stay strong. Thank you, Kayla said, smiling genuinely this time. I appreciate your concern. Ella bowed again and slipped away. Kayla remained on the balcony a moment longer, her mind drifting to the times she'd awakened to find Rhaegar by her side. The weight of his arm draped over her waist, his slow, measured breathing comforting her in ways she never thought possible. She allowed herself a small private hope that they could build a future, free from the shadow of war. When dusk came, Kayla joined Rhaegar, Thomas, Andrew, and Alpha Dorian in a smaller council chamber lit by flickering torches. Rowan was there as well, guarded by 2 Dark Moon warriors. He looked frail and exhausted but determined. I've told you all I know, Rowan said, voice trembling. Malachi believes that if he can break your mate bond, Kayla, then you'll be unclaimed and vulnerable to his sorcery. He wants to bind you to him, use your lineage for something dark. Kayla's heart pounded with revulsion at the thought. And the witches? She pressed. How do they plan to break the bond? Rowan swallowed, glancing nervously at Rhaegar as though afraid of provoking the Alpha King's rage. They have a ritual, one that involves capturing both mates. The witches will harness the energies of the bond itself, then sever it through blood magic. It's dangerous, but if done successfully, it would leave you both empty. It can even kill one or both mates if not performed precisely. A muscle in Rhaegar's jaw twitched. Over my dead body, he growled. Rowan hurried to continue. They'll need certain components, a piece of each mate's essence, hair or blood. They also need a place steeped in ancient power. Malachi's trying to find a sacred ruin that predates modern pacts, where the boundary between this realm and the moon goddess's domain is thin. Alpha Dorian frowned. I know of such places, but they're heavily guarded or difficult to reach. Thomas's eyes narrowed. We need to seal those sites off. Malachi won't rest until he finds one. If we can guess his target, we might be able to trap him. Andrew crossed his arms. But if he learns we suspect that, he might choose a different location. This is tricky. Kayla spoke up. We should gather our combined forces, station them strategically near each known ruin. That way, wherever he goes, we'll be ready. They pored over old maps, marking 4 possible sites where Malachi could attempt the bond-severing ritual. Each location was remote, mountain caverns, ancient ringed stones, or old temples crumbling under moss and ivy. A plan emerged. They would divide their warriors into squads, each led by trusted captains. Kela and Rhaegar would remain at the castle until they learned where Malachi intended to strike, ready to ride out at a moment's notice, and it was a bold, risky strategy. They had to rely on their intelligence network to spot Malachi before he actually performed the ritual. Still, it was better than waiting idly for an attack. When the meeting ended, the council dispersed in hushed resolution. Rowan remained behind under guard, pale and drawn, while Kela and Rhaegar walked side by side back through the winding hallways. You're worried, Rhaegar observed quietly, glancing at her drawn features. Kela let out a trembling breath. I am. I can't help but wonder if we'll be in time. Malachi is cunning, and if there's a traitor among us... I won't let him have you, Rhaegar said fiercely, stopping in the corridor. The flickering torchlight etched deep shadows across his face. I can't lose you, Kela. Her chest clenched. She stepped closer, lifting a hand to trace the faint scar that cut across his bicep from Malakai's blade. We barely had a moment to be us. After Magnus fell, I thought that would be the end of our troubles. He let out a low chuckle devoid of humor. Troubles seem to follow us, little wolf. Something about the way he said little wolf sent a shiver of warmth down her spine. Without further words, she reached up on her toes, pressing her mouth to his. He returned the kiss immediately, his arms circling her waist with careful possessiveness. In that stolen moment, the threat of witches and dark magic receded, leaving only the heat between them. She tasted both longing and fear on his lips, and she knew he tasted the same on hers, an unspoken admission of how deeply they needed each other. Eventually they broke apart, breathing ragged in the silence of the corridor. We'll face it together, she said again, voice steady despite her racing heart. Rhaegar nodded, then offered his arm. Come, he said softly. You need rest. She accepted, though she suspected that, like him, she would find little rest until the threat was ended. Days passed in a tense routine of scouting reports and strategic planning. Kela and Rhaegar spent hours in war councils, dividing their pack's warriors among the 4 potential ritual sites. Meanwhile, Andrew discreetly investigated any rumors of betrayal within the castle walls, while Thomas managed supply lines and dealt with the friction that inevitably arose between 2 large, recently hostile packs trying to coexist. Every so often, Kela would slip away to train in the courtyard or in the greenhouse Rhaegar had adapted into a private sparring area. She had to keep her sword arm limber despite the lingering soreness from the ambush. She refused to be caught off guard again. One morning, as she sparred with Thomas, wooden practice swords whirling in swift arcs, her father, Alpha Dorian, appeared at the greenhouse entrance. Kela halted, lowering her sword. Father, she said, chest rising and falling with exertion. Dorian's expression was unreadable. He nodded in greeting to Thomas, who bowed respectfully, and then stepped aside to give them privacy. You look strong, Dorian observed quietly. Stronger than ever. Kela couldn't tell if it was approval or unease in his voice. She recognized the guilt that sometimes flitted across his face when he saw how capable she had become in the wake of her older brother's deaths. I had good teachers, she said, thinking of how Thomas had drilled her in secret, how Rhaegar had pushed her limits. Dorian approached slowly. I know I haven't said it enough, but I'm proud of you, Kela. And I'm sorry I didn't see your strength sooner. I let grief consume me. Her throat tightened. Father, you've always done your best to protect me. You gave me a chance to lead without overshadowing me completely. He reached out and touched her shoulder lightly. Now I see you heading into a far greater danger. With Malakai's obsession and these dark arts, you face more than I ever did. It tears me apart to think you might be forced to endure more heartbreak. Kela's eyes brimmed with unshed tears. I understand the risk, but I have to protect our people. And Rhaegar, he's risked everything for me. I can't let fear stop me from fighting beside him. Dorian exhaled slowly. Then you have my blessing, not just as your father, but as your fellow Alpha. I will fight by your side. She nodded, a swell of gratitude rising in her chest. His acceptance felt like a small balm against the anxiety roiling within her. They parted with a solemn embrace. As she watched him go, she silently prayed that Malachi would never get close enough to force them into the horror of the bond-severing ritual. Late that evening, a messenger arrived at the castle gates flanked by 2 Dark Moon guards. Kela, Rhaegar, Andrew, and Thomas were roused from a half-finished meal to meet the man in the torch-lit courtyard. Wind whipped around them, stirring the scent of fear from the messenger. My lord, my lady, he panted. We have a sighting. Malakai's forces are on the move. They're heading toward the shattered peak. Rhaegar's gaze snapped to Kela. The shattered peak was one of the marked sites, a jagged cluster of mountains rumored to house ancient runic stones deep in a hidden cavern. The perfect place for a dark ritual. Andrew cursed under his breath. We'll move immediately. Kela's pulse raced. How many warriors does Malachi have? The messenger swallowed nervously. More than we expected. Some from lesser packs he's conquered. But that's not all. Scouts reported glimpses of figures in black cloaks, chanting. The witches, presumably. Rhaegar turned to Thomas. Rally the squads. Dorian's team will flank from the west, Andrew's from the east. Kela and I will lead the central force directly toward the shattered peak. Thomas bowed. Yes, my lord, I'll see to it. Time blurred into frantic preparation. Armor strapped, swords sharpened, bows and arrows bundled. Wolves shifted to run alongside mounted warriors. The fortress courtyard lit up with the glow of torches, the ring of steel, the clamor of final orders. Kela felt her heart pound against her ribs as she stood beside Rhaegar, checking her sword belt one last time. He rested a hand on her cheek, voice low enough that only she could hear. Stay close to me. Promise. She covered his hand with her own. I promise. They rode out under a gibbous moon that cast a silver sheen across the fields and forests. The combined might of the dark moon and moonlight packs thundered across the landscape, the paw beats of wolves, and the drumming hooves of horses resonating in Kela's bones. Adrenaline surged, tempered only by the gnawing worry of what Malachi might have planned. When they reached the foothills of the shattered peak, the scouts confirmed that Malachi's army was already present, clustered around a cavern mouth that led into the heart of the mountains. Fires glowed in the distance, and eerie chanting drifted on the night air. Kela shivered. Even from here she could sense the foul energy emanating from the witches' circle. Rhaegar signaled a halt, gathering his captains for a final briefing. The plan was simple. Encircle the area, trap Malachi's forces, and prevent them from completing any ritual. The witches had to be neutralized quickly if they were the key to severing the mate bond. Thomas gripped Kela's shoulder. I'll hold the left flank. If you see an opening, take it. Andrew, standing on Rhaegar's other side, nodded. I'll keep our lines secure on the right. The moment we see them attempt a ritual, we charge. Kela and Rhaegar exchanged a glance laden with mutual fear and determination. Then Rhaegar's wolf let out a bone-rattling howl that echoed across the rugged terrain, signaling the attack. Chaos erupted. Warriors poured forth, howls answering Rhaegar's call. Malachi's sentries sounded alarms, and in moments both sides clashed in a fury of steel and fangs. Kela ducked under an enemy's sword, driving her blade into his side with practiced precision. She caught a glimpse of Andrew leading a squad of dark moon wolves, tearing through the lines of Malachi's forcibly conscripted warriors. On the opposite flank, the moonlight fighters pressed in, guided by Thomas's sharp commands. Sparks flew as Kela found herself blade to blade with a towering soldier wearing Malachi's inverted crescent mark. He swung viciously, nearly knocking her off balance. She twisted away, ignoring the burn in her healing shoulder, and rammed her pommel into his jaw. He staggered, and she finished him with a clean strike. Blood pounded in her ears. Through the swirling melee, she heard Rhaegar's roar. She pivoted in time to see him, half-shifted, tearing down a path through two witches who had dared to approach. Their hoods fell back, revealing gaunt, hollow-eyed faces etched with occult symbols. One hissed and raised a staff crackling with dark magic. Rhaegar lunged, unstoppable, claws raking across her chest. The witch shrieked, collapsing in a pool of blackish-red blood. A sharp cry drew Kela's attention. She spotted another group of witches near the cavern entrance. Their chanting rose in fervor, the air around them distorting with malevolent energy. A swirl of sickly green mist coalesced in their midst. Kela sensed it reaching for her, prying at the bond in her soul that connected her to Rhaegar. She gasped, reeling as a spike of pain stabbed through her chest. Somewhere behind her, Rhaegar roared her name. She forced her feet forward, struggling to push back against the vile magic. If the witches completed their ritual, it wouldn't matter how many soldiers she cut down. Summoning every ounce of will, Kela charged toward the chanting circle. Blades, claws, and furious roars buffeted her from all sides, but she kept her eyes fixed on the flickering, unnatural glow. Suddenly, an immense figure blocked her path. Malachi. He stood clad in black armor, a mocking grin twisting his lips. "Kela Moonlight," he purred, voice carrying easily over the din of battle. "I've been waiting for you." Hatred flared in her. She raised her sword, ignoring the trembling in her arms. "You've lost already," she snarled. "We won't let you perform your twisted ritual." He laughed, the sound echoing harshly off the stone walls of the cavern entrance. "Who says I need you both alive to sever the bond?" He lifted a black-bladed weapon that glimmered with dark runes. "I only need a piece of you, then the witches can finish the job." They clashed, metal ringing out in a brutal symphony. Kela's arms shook with each impact. Malachi's strength was enhanced by dark power, making him far stronger than a normal alpha. She barely managed to parry his blows, each one threatening to knock her sword from her grasp. Blood pounded in her ears. The bond with Rhaegar flickered through her mind like a beacon, urging her to hold on. Then, with a sudden surge, Malachi smashed her sword aside and grabbed her by the throat. She choked, dropping her blade, kicking furiously. His grip tightened. "Perhaps I'll take your head," he snarled. "Rhaegar will feel the bond snap, and then the ritual will be a mere formality." Kela's vision blurred. She clawed at his gauntlet, but she was losing air fast. Just as black dots threatened to overtake her sight, a monstrous, pitch-black wolf barreled into Malachi's side with a savage roar. Malachi flew back, releasing Kela as he tumbled across the rocky ground. Gasping for breath, Kela fell to her knees. Rhaegar's wolf stood protectively over her, hackles raised, fangs bared at Malachi. A deep, rumbling growl rattled from his chest. She managed to scramble back to her feet, lifting her chin resolutely. "We do this together," she breathed, meeting Rhaegar's wolfish gaze. He dipped his head in agreement. Malachi rose, fury bleeding from his eyes. "Then die together," he spat. Lightning fast, he unleashed a wave of crackling dark magic from his gauntlet. Rhaegar rushed to shield Kela, but they were both swept off their feet, slamming into a jagged rock wall. Pain exploded across Kela's back. She heard Rhaegar's wolf whimper, shifting back partially into his human form as he crumpled beside her. Malachi advanced, the black-bladed weapon raised. Desperation filled Kela. She couldn't let him land a fatal blow. Summoning her last reserves, she seized a fallen spear. Her body screamed in protest as she launched herself upward, driving the spear toward his exposed flank. He whirled, bringing his weapon down. Sparks clashed as spear met sword, and for a heartbeat, they locked eyes. Kela poured all her hatred and fury into that single thrust. With a terrifying jolt, the spear slipped past Malachi's guard, piercing his armor. He staggered, eyes wide with shock. Black blood, tainted by dark magic, welled from the wound. He snarled, trying to raise his sword for one last strike. But Rhaegar, pushing himself unsteadily to his feet, delivered a ferocious punch to Malachi's jaw. The dark alpha reeled. Then Thomas and Andrew were there, flanking Malachi. Simultaneously, they drove their blades into his sides. A strangled cry tore from Malachi's throat as he collapsed to his knees. His gaze locked onto Kela's, burning with malice. "This isn't over," he hissed. But she could see the light draining from his eyes, the dark magic failing. His last breath rattled as he slumped forward, dead. A sudden eerie silence descended over the battlefield. The witches' chanting faltered, then ceased entirely. Some fled into the darkness. Others were cut down by enraged wolves. The few who survived scattered, powerless without their champion. The remaining warriors loyal to Malachi dropped their weapons, surrendering or fleeing. Kela's breath came in ragged gasps. It was over. Malachi was defeated. But she felt no triumph, only a strange hollowness. She looked around for Rhaegar, her heart seizing when she found him slumped on the ground. Blood seeped from a deep gash in his side and his breathing was shallow. "No!" Kela cried, scrambling to his side. She pressed her hands to the wound, panicking at the amount of blood on her fingers. "Stay with me, Rhaegar. Please." He forced his eyes open, gray irises dulled with pain. "Kela," he rasped. You're safe." Tears blurred her vision. "Don't talk like that, we're both safe." His lips twitched in a weak smile. "Hurts so damn much." Thomas and Andrew rushed over, kneeling beside them. Andrew tore off a piece of his tunic to bind Rhaegar's wound, while Thomas called frantically for a healer. Chaos still reigned in the background, with the wounded moaning and warriors trying to gather the dead. Kela cradled Rhaegar's head in her lap, willing him to hold on. She pressed her forehead to his, feeling the mate bond pulse in her chest. "Don't you dare leave me," she thought fiercely, her tears falling onto his pale cheeks. Within minutes, the healers arrived and carefully lifted Rhaegar onto a makeshift stretcher. Kela stayed at his side, refusing to let go of his hand. As they carried him away from the battlefield, she fought the rush of despair. "He can't die," she told herself. "Not now. Not after everything." They returned to the Dark Moon Castle under a somber dawn. Word spread quickly that Malachi was dead, but the cost of victory weighed heavily on everyone's hearts. Dozens of wounded were brought to the infirmary, including Rhaegar. Kela hovered outside the chamber where healers worked tirelessly, her dress stained with dust and blood. Every minute felt like an eternity. Ella eventually coaxed her into washing her hands and face, though Kela refused to leave the corridor entirely. Thomas and Andrew tended to the pack's logistical needs, ensuring the safety of the survivors, and dispatching squads to hunt down any remaining witches. Alpha Dorian arrived soon after, breathing a sigh of relief at his daughter's survival, yet sharing her anxious vigil for Rhaegar's condition. Near dusk, the door to the infirmary opened and a weary healer stepped out. Kela rushed forward, eyes full of fear. "Is he alive?" the healer said, raising a hand to steady her. "He lost a lot of blood. We've done what we can, but he's weak. He's asking for you." Kela didn't wait. She slipped past the healer into the dim room. Rhaegar lay on a bed, torso swathed in bandages, face drawn from pain and exhaustion. Yet when he saw her, a flicker of warmth lit his eyes. She approached quietly, tears threatening to spill anew. "You terrified me," she whispered, taking his hand and gently smoothing her thumb over his knuckles. He managed a faint smile. "I'm too stubborn to die. Besides, I have unfinished business with you." Despite her tears, a laugh escaped her. "Idiot," she murmured affectionately, brushing a strand of damp hair from his forehead. She sank onto the edge of the bed, leaning closer so he could hear her quiet words. "We've put an end to Malachi. No more dark magic, no more threat of losing each other." His hand tightened weakly around hers. "But I nearly lost you out there. I saw him choke you." His voice cracked, and then he nearly finished me off. A fresh wave of emotion washed over her. She bent down, pressing her lips to his brow. "We survived. That's all that matters." Rhaegar's gaze roved over her face as though memorizing every feature. Then his expression shifted to something more resolute. "Once I can stand, let's not wait any longer to solidify our bond. Truly, completely." Her heart flipped, and heat rose to her cheeks. She knew what he meant. In werewolf custom, marking a mate was the final step to sealing the bond, ensuring no force, mundane or magical, could easily sever it. They had been dancing around it, half bound in spirit, but never fully consummating the mate bond. She swallowed. "I'm yours, Rhaegar, whenever you're ready." A faint grin tugged at his lips, warming the entire room with its sincerity. He squeezed her hand, and she leaned in, letting him rest his head against her chest. They stayed like that, lost in the sound of each other's breathing, while the shadows lengthened against the infirmary's stone walls. Over the following days, Rhaegar mended steadily under the care of skilled healers. The packs mourned their lost warriors and celebrated their victory over Malachi. The witches who escaped vanished into the wilderness, leaderless and powerless to continue their dark mission. Rumors spread that the last trace of Malachi's hold had faded from the kingdom. With the weight of looming war lifted, a sense of relief spread throughout the castle. Repairs that had been rushed for battle now continued at a more measured pace, and the alliance between Moonlight and Darkmoon felt stronger than ever. Kela found herself moving more freely through the halls, receiving nods of genuine respect from warriors who had once eyed her with doubt. They recognized her as Alpha Queen, the one who had fought and bled beside them. On a cool, clear evening, once Rhaegar had regained enough strength to walk without assistance, he summoned Kela to his chambers. She arrived, heart thrumming with anticipation. She wore a simple yet elegant gown of moon-white cloth that Ella had insisted she change into. The warm glow of a hearth fire lit the room, chasing away the autumn chill. Rhaegar stood near the fireplace, his black hair brushing his broad shoulders, the bandages beneath his tunic barely hidden. He still moved with caution, but his eyes gleamed with a purpose she recognized instantly. He was done letting caution dictate his life. "Kela," he said softly, closing the distance between them. "I've been waiting for you." She inhaled, nerves and excitement swirling together. "Are you sure you're well enough to be out of bed?" He exhaled a wry chuckle. "I'm not as strong as I'd like, but if I wait any longer, my heart might burst with wanting you near me. Truly near me." Her breath caught. The mate bond pulsed like a living flame between them, and she realized how deeply they both needed this, needed to solidify their union, to chase away the lingering shadows of fear. Slowly, as though afraid to startle her, Rhaegar brushed his fingertips across her cheek. She turned her face into his touch, letting out a trembling sigh. "I'm ready," she whispered. "I've never been more certain of anything." A low growl of approval rumbled in his chest. Gently, he slid his arm around her waist, drawing her against his warmth. Their lips met, tentative at first, then escalating with pent-up longing. Kela's mind spun, flooded with relief and desire in equal measure. The world outside, armies, witches, betrayals, slipped away, leaving only the steady beat of his heart against hers. She let him guide her toward the bed where he sat carefully, wincing a little as he moved. "Stubborn?" she teased softly, concern warring with amusement. "I can see you're still in pain." "Nothing I can't handle," he murmured, pulling her onto his lap. His hands traced the curve of her hips, then slid up her back, his touch reverent. She shivered under the intensity of his gaze. This was the same man who had roared in battle, the Alpha King who had waded through blood to protect her, now looking at her as though she were the only thing that mattered in the entire kingdom. A hush settled over them. She leaned in to kiss him again, softly at first, then deepening as he responded with carefully restrained urgency. Each brush of lips and slide of hands ignited the mate bond, tangling their senses in a rush of warmth. She felt the unique hum of his energy meshing with hers, an intimate dance that transcended mere physical connection. His lips traveled along her jaw and down to her neck where her pulse thundered. She gasped softly, tangling her fingers in his hair. "Rhaegar," she whispered, a plea and a promise in one. He paused, breath hot against her throat. Then in a low voice he said, "This might sting, but it will bind us forever." She nodded, eyes squeezed shut, heart pounding. She wanted this, had wanted it from the moment she realized she loved him more than life itself. A surge of primal magic crackled in the air as Rhaegar's canines elongated. Carefully, he bit down on the spot where her neck met her shoulder, a surge of heady pain and pleasure rolling through her. She arched involuntarily, a cry escaping her lips. The mate bond flared like a burst of starlight, weaving itself tighter than ever. She felt Rhaegar's soul brush hers, felt the flood of his relief, his devotion, and his own echoing pain from the bite. Tears sprang to her eyes, not from hurt but from the sheer intensity of what they shared in that moment. "Kela," he murmured raggedly, licking the wound to seal it with the subtle healing power that came from an alpha's marking. She felt heat spreading through her veins, every nerve alive. Tentatively, she mirrored the gesture, pressing her mouth to the juncture of his neck and shoulder, letting her own instincts guide her. The moment her fangs broke his skin, she tasted copper and a spark of powerful energy that nearly stole her breath. His answering groan resonated through her. She sealed the mark, tears slipping down her cheeks as she drank in the raw closeness. The bond roared between them, forging something unbreakable, something no witch or warlord could destroy. She felt his heartbeat thunder beneath her palms, and she knew it matched the wild rhythm of her own. They sank into each other's arms, the taste of tears and passion mingling. In that shared vulnerability, there was no more room for fear. The moment stretched, a sacred vow written into their flesh and soul. Whatever trials would come, they would face them together, united in both spirit and body. Time lost meaning as they gave in to the full flood of their bond. Soft murmurs and heated caresses wove them closer still, and at the peak of it all, Kela felt as if she were both rooted to the earth and soaring through the skies, a paradox of safety and freedom. She clutched Rhaegar's shoulders, breathless, tears of joy on her cheeks. He whispered her name like a prayer, and she knew in that instant that she had found the home she had long sought in him and he in her. Eventually, the storm of sensation waned, leaving them entwined in the comforting hush of night. She tucked her head under his chin, feeling the slow, measured rise and fall of his chest. He pressed a tender kiss to her temple, tracing idle patterns on her back. "You are my mate, my queen," he said, voice hushed with awe. "Nothing will tear us apart now." She closed her eyes, letting the reassurance settle in her heart. "I love you," she whispered simply, knowing the words were long overdue, yet perfectly timed. He swallowed, and in the candlelit gloom she felt his arms tighten around her. "I love you, Kela. Forever." They stayed like that, breathing in sync, matching heartbeats, content to let the rest of the world exist elsewhere. Outside, the castle carried on. Guards patrolled the walls, servants extinguished torches in empty corridors, and the night creatures prowled under the moon's gaze. But here, in their private sanctuary, the war was over, and all that mattered was the promise they had sealed in flesh and blood. When sleep finally claimed them, Kela drifted off with her cheek against Rhaegar's chest, feeling a profound peace she had scarcely imagined possible. The prophecy, the battles, the betrayals, none could overshadow the resonance of their connection. They had risked everything, and now they had gained something far more precious. A love strong enough to endure even the darkest of storms.